Good afternoon. Final panel that I'm hosting today, so you won't have to see my face again. And actually, it's one of my favourite, education. And I'm joined with some really good industry experts to help fill through some of the questions this afternoon. So what I'll do, I'll allow them each to introduce themselves, and I'll start from Dr Anne Nortcliffe first.
Hello, I'm Anne Nortcliffe from Canterbury Christchurch University. In 2017, I created a brand new engineering facility from scratch, but on principles of inclusivity, diversity and equality. And we are very much making that way. 38% of our staff are female and 65% of staff are Black and Asian.
Excellent, I can't beat that one. Hello everyone, I'm Ros Thorpe. I'm Director of Education and Standards at the Chartered Institute of Building, which is a professional body for managers working in construction.
Good afternoon, I'm Lisa Malloy, author of Malloy in Construction. I specifically wrote Malloy in Construction to educate primary school children, teachers and parents about the varying roles that we have in our industry. Aside from that, I've been in the industry for 20 years. I've been a commercial director and a commercial manager of varying construction companies, worked in the Middle East and built megastructures such as oil rigs and the like, so I've had quite a varied career. Biggest thing that I love to do is probably try and work with the younger generation and mentor them and give back to them. So, yeah, had a brilliant time.
Hello, my name's Andrew Jowett. I'm the co-founder and chief executive for Builder International. We're a vocational skills training organisation focused on construction trades, but with a difference. All our work is in Africa, where we have a big programme, probably the biggest trainer in the country in this sector. So I'm hoping I can contribute some of our observations and lessons to our discussions. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for all introducing yourself. So, and we've talked about it most of the morning, and we do know from a construction perspective, we continue to face a massive skill shortage. So we're talking about education and training becoming increasingly important in attracting new skills and talent. So I'm going to be asking the panel this afternoon a few questions around that. So the first question, what are the current trends and challenges in education and training for the industry? Are there any particular areas of the industry where there's a particularly acute shortage of skilled workers? And I'm going to come to you, Dr. Anne.
So the civil engineers this month in 2023 has highlighted there's 173 vacancies in engineering alone at the moment. Wow. The work has to start back at primary and secondary school. We know from the work we've been doing down in Kent that if you have meaningful STEM or STEAM activities at each key stage, so we're talking from foundation at 3-year-olds right through to 18-year-olds, you will actually progress them to a STEM career. So it's actually, you've got to invest in a long-term journey of pipeline to move that talent into the industry. But also then there's a responsibility at higher education to provide an educational experience that meets this generation that's coming through who are interested in sustainability, but a more inclusive approach.
Lisa.
I think from an education perspective, the challenges that we face is, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's just getting it into the schools at such an early age, and it's so difficult to get it in there. Whenever I've gone to a school, the children are not aware of any construction at all other than building a house, and even then they don't fundamentally understand it. So anything wider than that, as opposed to a civil engineer or, you know, drainage or bridges, or it doesn't even come into their mind. Another thing that I think that the struggle that we have is, from a training perspective, is we do face a huge skill shortage. So when we're out on that coal face, we've got a skill shortage on the ground, so we're thinly spread, and it's releasing those people to be able to train them. But it's absolutely vital in our industry that we maintain that we don't get wrapped up in that skill shortage and prevent our workforce and our professional staff from being educated and trained. So that is a massive, massive challenge that we've got to navigate at the moment.
And then how can the UK companies collaborate with education providers such as university to help do this?
I think that's another challenge is the actual course content of the university. Like, is it relevant to the industry that we're in? Being at the coalface would really, really like to see the fact that people come from education and they're more or less ready to hit the ground running, that they have a real representation of what our industry's like. So there definitely needs to be some sort of collaboration there between industry and the education provider, especially when the industry's changing and we're moving at a pace where that course content also needs to move with it. You generally get a course that will cater for a number of people that when they leave education will then go on to do a very, very varying role in construction. Not everybody will do the same role, yet they've been on that course that is geared like one-dimensional. So it's something that we need to navigate together.
Okay. Ross?
Yeah, I kind of look at it in a different way because I think we shouldn't expect someone coming out of university to be competent in their job immediately. You know, what we need to do is look at what other professions do, like, I don't know, medicine or any other profession. There is a structured mentoring program that all the industry buys into, all those NHS hospitals all buy into one structured, long mentoring program. So we mustn't expect graduates to come out and be work ready. That's the mistake that the industry makes. You know, that you've got the education, so you must be able to do the job. Think back to when you graduated. I remember when I graduated, I was practically good for nothing for a good number of months, you know. So, you know, let's support graduates, make sure that they get good mentoring programs and that they learn to do things properly and they're not under pressure to deliver to time or to budget and to just do a quick job, because that's the very thing that will make us lose them. So attracting is one thing, but how do you retain people? You retain people by getting them into a profession that is valued and respected, and that we don't expect people to do things they're not comfortable doing. The other thing I would say about universities, they are commercial organizations, so they're not there to provide industry with their next generation of skills needs. And we have to compete with other professions, because people coming out from construction or civil engineering based degrees have very good transferable skills and don't necessarily have to go into construction. So we need to make it attractive to them. We need to make it supportive for them, and we need to think about those people rather than thinking about the education establishment. Why aren't they doing it? Think about those people that are on those courses and how you can offer them something.
No, good answer. And I'll ask the same question to you, Andrew, because you're waiting to go.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thanks for that. Yeah, I'm going to bring it right down to the vocational skills training provider, the trade skills, which is where we operate. Entry-level bricklaying, concrete workers, tiling, paving, carpentry. That's where we're working at. And the context is very different. We work in Zambia, where there is high level of unemployment, but there's a skills shortage because there is so little training being provided. But in order to make sure we're meeting employers' needs, we've developed a program that works very closely with employers. And the two key aspects to that, which is crucial for the success of our work. One is the content of the training, to make sure it's fit for purpose when the curriculum there is very out of date. So we listen carefully to what employers want. And the other is a little bit in line with what you were saying, Ross, about sort of turning the theory into practical skills. We have a work placement program. I'm always careful not to call it work experience, because we make sure people are paid for the work they do. So once our trainees reach a certain agreed level of competence, which is usually a bit slower than an experienced person, they get 3 to 6 months paid work placement with an employer, and then they're off.
Yeah.
They're off and running, the majority. So that's really critical to get that right at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely.
there is also a level of responsibility on the education providers. In reality, we know that a lot of female students and Black and Asian students actually don't go into the profession. Their experience is at education that stops them from moving into the industry itself. So there is a level of responsibility of education providers to rethink that curriculum and make it inclusive. And going back to your question about industry ready, well, we actually do produce industry ready graduates because our students work on live briefs from industry from day one, from their foundation year, their first year through, working with businesses, working on real engineering problems that businesses are taking forward into their businesses. So it can be done. It's just a question the curriculum providers do need to work with their local regional industry to embed that into the curriculum and re-educate the educators as part of that programme.
Thank you. And this question, Lisa, what are the most important qualifications and skills that the UK construction companies are looking for when they're looking at new hires?
I think at the moment, for me, and for every leader out there, we really need to think about the person who comes through as opposed to the education or the skill. We face such a shortage that we actually need to be looking at the person that we bring in has got the aptitude for the industry. Yeah. Because you can take any person out there and skill and educate them. And as an industry, it's actually what we're really good at. There's a whole host of apprenticeships out there. There's a whole host of training programs. So we're actually really, really, really good at doing that. And it's that we need to look at. There will be some people that come through that have an education level that is the subject matter of their job. So, for example, you'll get a quantity surveyor who's been and studied a quantity surveying degree. But there's also a lot of people that come through that haven't got a degree or a level of education that's related to the construction industry that I come across in my professional life, but that have then converted that into something in the industry. And it's the person itself that we need to take and shape and invest in.
Absolutely. And Andrew?
We call that work-ready skills or life skills, and we do a lot of this because a lot of our trainees have never worked in a kind of formal work environment. So how to turn up on time, ready to work with your tools, with your PPE, how to work in teams, how to problem solve together, having the confidence to raise concerns if there's a health and safety issue that you've noticed. And you're quite right, even in our world, the trade competence is the starting point, but what employers want, where we work, is people who can listen and be a good member of their workforce. And as I said, those characteristics are just as important as the hard skills.
So how can we get universities and training bodies aligned to what the needs are of the industry? How can we align those training organisation in university? Because, Ros, you made a point that, universities are businesses,
they are
costly businesses.
Yeah.
So how do we get that alignment in terms of...
Yeah, no, it's a nuanced picture because a lot of people would do a part-time degree or a placement degree, and then they can get those skills. Well, I think the point I was making about construction is we don't have a common competence framework that other professions have, and I think that's what's lacking. So a competence framework would be really useful that people could use on placements in a part-time degree, and those coming out of university from a full-time degree who may have very little in terms of practical skills, it would be a framework for them to develop those practical skills. But I do think universities, they do have targets, so they do have to do skills development, and many universities do use live projects and simulations, etc. But I think getting them to work closely with industry is a challenge. Previous to the introduction of tuition fees and removal of grant, there were a lot of industry practitioners working as teachers in universities and colleges who could pass on their practical knowledge and skills and could, create scenarios and things. There are now a lot of academics in university who've never worked in our industry. Yeah. They've come a purely academic route, and they're only interested in critical analysis, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a patchy picture, but what we've done at the Chartered Institute of Building is within our accreditation process, we've insisted that they bring in industry practitioners, because if you want to learn, if you're studying towards a particular profession, you want to talk to people who practice that profession. You don't want to constantly talk about the academic discipline.
Yeah.
You want practical skills, yeah.
Absolutely.
So it is a challenge, but I think the better universities are doing it really well. I mean, I know Leeds College of Building have fantastic skills development programs, really, really, really good. And they have really close links within industry.
Oh, thank you. And Anne?
The other thing is you can get involved. Every college, every university has to have a strategic industry advisory board. This is a requirement, particularly at university level, because they develop their own curriculum and they have to demonstrate that they've listened to industry and embedded it into the curriculum.
Thank you. How can companies attract and retain diverse talent through education and training initiatives? Rosalind, I'm going to come back to you on this one.
Sorry, can you say it again?
Yeah, sorry. How can companies attract and retain diverse talent through education and training initiatives?
I think it's not just attracting, it's retaining them. That I think you can attract them. We've developed a degree apprenticeship in building control with local authority building control and the University of Wolverhampton, and it has some fantastic, great diversity on it. One of the things that we did do at the end of the first cohort was to see what people's challenges were, and we found that people with caring responsibilities found it much tougher than those that perhaps didn't have that, So definitely a lot of the women found it difficult to make it work in their life. So I think it's really important that companies work with their education providers, and it's really important that those companies make sure their education providers give support to students, so that the support package is almost more important than the actual course itself.
Yeah.
In terms of attracting a more diverse workforce. One of the other things I would say is naming conventions should be looked at. So don't call it a degree in building, because you won't attract a diverse workforce. Call it sustainable built environment or construction or something. Make sure your syllabus has a lot of things in there that are exciting around technology, net zero, green technologies, the environment, social value. These are the things that will attract a more diverse workforce. And you'll always have a skill shortage unless you make your workforce more diverse. So that would be my advice. Look at your curriculum. Is it exciting? Does it assume that it's going to be white men that do this course, or is it, widely appealing? So look at your curriculum, look what you call the course, and really support your more diverse learners.
Absolutely agree. And Andrew?
Right, I'll take it back to the trades level, take it back to Africa, where the context is very different, where there is a huge amount of prejudice against women in the sector. I know that's an issue in the UK, but we've been starting from minus whatever. And what our strategy has been over the last 5 years, which has led to 25% of the graduates from our trades program being women, which is high by all standards. They don't do as well after training, but they do well. We managed to persuade a number of employers to sort of take on some of the women from our program by bringing them into the training center, seeing their work and their standards as they progress through the training program, to take them on the work placement scheme. And, once we got 3 or 4 sort of bought in, crossing that threshold of women can do a great job, and they do a brilliant job, particularly on the finer skills, particularly on the tiling and painting, do a better job. We've then tried to use those examples to be a beacon, if you like, and persuade their peers to do the same. So that's been a slow process, but we now have about 20 companies taking on women from a standing start 5 years ago. The other thing is really practical. There's some really practical constraints on a construction site for being a safe place to work for women. Safeguarding is one for sure, but then things like separate bathrooms, the right PPE, all those things we've had to start from scratch and work with employers to engage and incur costs in order to make it possible for women to just enter that workplace. We do a lot of training, not just with the women for their resilience, their ability to cope with all the knockbacks they get, but also with the men they're working with on the program. And it's great because when you just see a few things start to change, you can build on that and nurture that and celebrate it. There's nothing like a good awards ceremony or free lunch to get a point across, and we do that a lot.
Absolutely. Lisa?
I think we talk a lot about education as in education in the industry. It's educating people about the industry. I think there's far too many people out there that don't understand what we're about. They don't understand the opportunity that's open to them. When I talk to women, I say, the biggest thing is what you don't realise is I have a career that's very, very sustainable. At any point in time, I can go and work anywhere in the world and earn a decent salary that looks after my family. There's nothing more freeing than that. But when I start to talk about the career path that I've had, and I've done things like, I took a 6-month-old baby to the Middle East so that I could go on a project and build an oil rig. I was 5 months pregnant when I came off that oil rig. So yes, I was climbing around in 50 degrees heat, 5 months pregnant. I came home 5 months pregnant, had another baby, and then mobilised a second time with a 9-month-old and then a 3-year-old, and my husband both times. Had a role reversal where he stayed at home and was a stay-at-home dad, and I went into the desert and built oil rigs. And when I tell females that story, they are amazed that I had an employer even that supported me to do that. But I did. That's the whole point. I did. Yeah. And it's educating them that opportunity is out there and it's open to you. I also very much like to tell them that industry paid for me completely. I didn't go down a traditional route of doing a degree full-time. I done it part-time. So I had no financial burden from a perspective of any student loans. And they're amazed that opportunity is out there. And as an industry, we still have that opportunity to give to people, but we never, ever sell it out. Our image is absolutely appalling. We never, ever sell the good side of what we do. I'm surrounded by amazing professionals every single day, all achieving in their own right. And I think it's about time that they educated people out there about their achievements before we started educating people in the industry. We need to educate them about the industry.
Well said, Lisa. Well said. So, technology, close to my heart. What role can technology play in education and training for the UK construction?
So the thing that's coming over the hill very fast is VR. We already know for training welders, VR accelerates that training. In actual fact, the quality of their welding ability is vastly improved, and that's some work being done at Mid-Kent in Kent, and also over the border in France and Belgium. So VR is going to play a huge part now in our educational programme and in developing that, but also for accelerating what we can do in the industry from construction side and engineering side. We already have seen that happen in the car manufacturing industry, and it's already been mentioned earlier in a panel here earlier. Build off-site is coming, and part of that is the more manufacturing approach. So we will be taking the engineering from that industry, which has been using VR extensively as part of that for the last 12 years.
Now, I wasn't going to ask you this question, Andrew, but I am, because of the region that you're in terms of technology. How does that play out?
Well, the use of software in construction project management is pretty limited. So there's a lot of progress to be made there. The prefab buildings are starting to come in for some social housing projects. I've seen that, but generally speaking, it's still quite traditional. Steel frame buildings are only just coming in Southern Africa, in the capital where we work. But where we are looking at technology actually is on the back of our training program and connections with employers, we are getting requests for workers. So people we know will say, I need 10 carpenters, I need 15 bricklayers. And we're not really set up to respond to that, but we are developing an app at the moment because smartphones are prevalent, surprisingly quick uptake. Pretty much everybody's got a smartphone. Generally no credit on it, but they have the cheap Chinese phones you can get. And we're going to try and we're looking at that as a way of matching employment opportunities with people who've come through our program. And we have a Facebook group page, so they keep in touch that way. So, you know, it's a small example, but it's possible to use technology to everyone's advantage.
Absolutely. Ross?
Yeah, I mean, I think education has changed vastly since, you know, over the last 10, 20 years, and it will continue to change. I think virtual reality will be important, but so will digital and AI and all the other robotics, all the other technology, which also actually plays into some of the things that we might use to attract people into the industry, because it starts to look much more modern. I sometimes think that when people come to us to talk about their education, for example, come to college or university, you've almost got to demystify their preconceptions of what construction is, because they will have absorbed year after year seeing somebody up on a roof. It looks very dangerous, looks very hard work. Seeing somebody in a hole, you know, they won't have seen the things that are really exciting. So somehow or another, you know, it comes back to your point that we really need to put those across, and technology is a key part of that.
Do you think that the syllabus that is taught in education, like university and training centres, do you think they're up to date enough to draw in the candidates?
That's again patchy. So the universities, yes, if they've got strong research centres and good laboratories and things like that, then yes. But I think further education has been starved of cash for so long, it can't afford any, any sort of equipment or laboratories or, and, you know, a president of ours went to visit a newly opened, you know, really high-tech college that had been built. All of it built off-site, really built to really high specification in terms of energy efficiency, etc. And inside that college, there were students laying bricks on top of each other, and that was it, really. You know, so it's about money, some of it. Yeah. It's about expertise. How do they attract people to work in colleges? You know, the salaries for a college lecturer is so appalling. You wonder that anyone would do it, you know. So further education does need significant investment. And, you know, when you think about it, lifelong skills is going to be, lifelong learning is going to be really important in this sort of digital revolution. So it really does need much higher priority.
And finally, how can companies measure the success of their education and training initiatives?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I would say retention is a top one, because if you're just putting people through and then they're being poached, then that means there's something wrong, you know. So retention is a top one. But I do think it's about taking a longer-term look at your business and making sure your business is sustainable in the longer term, and that you are going to be able to tender and bid for jobs that perhaps you couldn't 5 years ago because you now have a better skilled workforce. You know, these are the sorts of things I would suggest they look at, rather than just how many died in the middle of the program and how many left, you know. Yeah. So just look at your future business and how that, I mean, it really will improve the growth of your business if you invest in skills.
Is there a struggle in that? We talked about skill shortage, that some employers may think, well, I don't have the revenue or the budget to invest in training. I need to get people just getting out doing the job. Is there a risk of that?
There is a risk of that, and that's the kind of short-termist business practice that we get stuck in. So don't get stuck in the short term. Start to look to the future. And even if you don't have enough people today, you won't have enough people tomorrow. You might have even fewer people the day after. So you better get on with recruiting the people. Your business is your people, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Lisa, question for you.
I think we've got a responsibility to invest in our people as well. You're right, for the future. I think every employer has got that responsibility. But I agree, the measure of it, how do you measure whether your training initiatives have been successful? It's so subjective to measure that. But the retention of, do you have your staff in front of you? Have you retained them? That's the biggest sign that you're doing something right. And I always think that age-old saying of, that you should give your staff the tools to leave, but give them the reason to stay. And I think that's a really good measure of your business. But ultimately, it is absolutely critical that we start or maintain our training and education because of the skill shortage that we face, and then that training and education, that's they become mentors and transfer that down to new people coming in, so that you're almost like replenishing constantly and constantly maintaining that training level just to be able to survive. And I do think that's a really good point, that if you can tender for work that you couldn't tender for years ago because you didn't have that skill set within your business, that is a really, really good measure of where your business is going, and will ultimately, if you've got that happy workforce that's trained and skilled, will add to your bottom line. And that's one of the most important things. But the one thing that I would say is that I think we've got a real to do a lot of work on is the female retention in the industry. I think there's got to be a substantial amount of work done by industry to look at the problems that we have there.
Absolutely. And Andrew, coming to you with the same question.
Well, for us, it's that the employers we work with come back to us to take more trainees on placement. But if you look at that question on impact from the individual person who's been trained, because we get money from grants and government and donors, we're a charity, it's beholden to us to demonstrate the impact of that support. So the outputs might be 200, 250 qualified trainees a year, but really we want to know what happens afterwards. So we commission a survey every year for 5 years for an individual trainee. We've done this for nearly 10 years now. And we track what happens to our graduates over that period. And we're looking not just to see what how their income's improved, but also what's really important in the context we work in is resilience to being out of work. And that boils down to assets, really. Because if you've got some spare cash, you'll invest in property or other assets, or even a small business. That often happens, actually, on the back of earning a surplus to your daily requirements. So we tie that in with a quite technical sort of poverty indicator, because we benchmark everybody when they come into the program. So we do a lot of work to monitor the performance of our graduates. And within that, definitely dissecting by gender is a really key component of that.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Some of the business schools have calculated that if you have an inclusive workforce, you could actually increase your profit margin by 26 to 35%. So actually, there is a financial incentive to do so. But we've talked about retention. But the other thing that's important to retention, particularly on an inclusive perspective, is career progression.
Yeah.
So actually demonstrating that you can move on from your training, moving up in the structure of the business.
Yeah.
So you're planning your business over 5-10 years, you should be planning your pipeline of where you expect them to be in 5-10 years in your business, part of that growth plan. Otherwise, they will leave. I have seen too many degree apprenticeships who've come through on the 16-year route, and they're qualifying at 23, 25, and the boss still sees them as that little 16-year-old when they came through the door. And then they've hired a graduate who's all shiny and new, and they think they're wonderful, and the poor apprentice is neglected. So it's remembering they're changing on that journey, and you change the environment as they progress.
Thank you, thank you. So we come to the end of the questions, but I'd always like to to the audience. Is there any questions that anyone would like to ask the panellists? If we can get the mic across.
So we're talking about people in the industry who are hiring all these graduates or people coming out of university. But on the other side, as the people who are applying, I'm a recent graduate, if you actually apply to try to get into the industry, it is very evident that the number of years under your belt are given more importance than your actual skill set or the kind of person that you are, how willing you are to work, and how willing you are to grow into the space. So how do you think we can bridge that gap into getting people into the industry? Because this kind of a gap that they're looking for, the number of years, is what is actually discouraging people from getting into construction, and people are looking elsewhere. So what do you think can be done about this?
Who wants to answer this one?
Well, I faced this when I went to the Middle East, funny enough, because to get into the GCC, they generally say that you need to have 5 years experience. And the whole time that I was trying to get through the door there, I was like, well, I can't get through the door because I haven't got 5 years experience, and I'm never going to get through that door because of that. And somebody took me, actually. Somebody said, I'll take you out there, and that gave me that experience level that I needed. So somehow as an industry, we need to have more of an open mindset where we look at people. I don't think we're fundamentally looking at our skill shortage enough, thinking, how do we overcome the skill shortage? We're all sat there thinking we've got a skill shortage. Yeah, but what's the answer? How do we overcome it? The answer is that we've got to look beyond the parameters that we're currently looking at, that they're looking at those years. You've got to look at somebody who hasn't got that and think of how can you bring them into the business? How are they going to suit your business? How do you need to develop them and skill them for your need? So we need to, across the whole board of industry, open our mind up.
One of the fundamental things is you actually need to look at your recruitment strategy and your approach. If you're a large corporation, it's based on a graduate mechanism that was designed in the 1950s to attract a white male. And believe it or not, Amazon has actually put AI into it, and they realised that it's made it even worse. So if you've actually implemented an AI structure into your system, you need to be reflecting back and taking a roll back and re-looking at your recruitment methodologies. There is some actually really good organisations out now who are working with large corporates, but also medium and small enterprises to change that recruitment processes, to get you to challenge and rethink those processes. Equal Engineers, I can highly recommend working with them. We already work with them in industry to change that. In order for me to recruit 38% females, I had to rip up the HR rulebook and take those lessons to make those changes.
Thank you. Anyone can answer this question? Any further question? Yeah.
Hello, it's not actually a question, it's just a comment going back to something that was mentioned right at the beginning. I work in the roofing industry, and a major part of the industry, a lot of the training and education is done by the companies themselves, so the manufacturers, the merchants, the roofing contractors. So something was mentioned right at the beginning about collaboration, so the education keeping up with industry and what the requirements are. And I think that's a real key thing to moving forwards and bringing new people in, is that collaboration with companies to see what are their requirements and how the education can support companies to hold their hand, basically, support them as they bring new people in, not necessarily who have got a degree background, who are coming right off the street, coming to join a company in construction, and to say to that company, okay, we can provide that support to you. These are the courses, these are the qualifications that we can provide that will tie in with what training you're giving yourselves to those individuals. So that was it.
Very valid point. Collaboration. Any further questions? Well, we've come to the end of our session today, and I'd just like to thank the panel for joining for the final panel on education, but I'd also like to say a massive thank you to Design and Build that have worked effortlessly to get all these guest speakers this afternoon, and actually this morning. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Red Row, Multiplex, Cube Lighting, RCK, Hayes, and Build My Talent. But also a special thank you to Michaela Wayne for pulling this all together. So if you can give a great... and to all her team as well at Design and Build. So well done for putting it together. And I will say I've had some great comments during the day that this has been one of the first ones that's been done like this, and be assured it's going to be repeated because we've had some great feedback. So thank you again, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.